sun so quickly sets, all the colors bleed to darkness again. When I was you, I'd linger all day, lighting fuses in my mind. I don't regret a thing. Mystery was delicious, and I licked it up. It wasn't always like this. It wasn't always this way. They tell me that little boy used to laugh at the halls while he played. But then a charm or a spell, after the lights faded down,
Welcome back to the show. As always, I'm Chad. And this evening we have a returning guest. I mean, it's been 2 years since he was on, but Ezra Gale is running another Kickstarter, and he is back to talk about that. And he's brought somebody with him. So let's bring them in and find out about them and the project. Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hi. Hey, Chad.
Howdy.
Like I said, it was about I was looking back in my catalog of shows, and it was about almost 2 years ago to the date that you were first on, Ezra.
Wow. Well, I'm consistent then, at least.
Yeah.
You know.
So, well, before we get started talking about the project, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, as like your history with comics as a reader. I know, Ezra, we talked about that before, but it's been 2 years, so I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I'm
people.
not sure what covered. Yeah.
And then we'll find out about Patrick. So, whoever wants to go first, tell us a bit about yourself and your history with comics as a reader and creator.
Well, I'm not the comics creator, so I guess I'll go first. I don't know why, but I was a certified comic book nerd growing up. I think I can say it. I think I can say I was card carrying. You know, I don't know when what my gateway drug it was, but you know, probably the X-Men was like what got me to be, you know, just fully involved in comics. There was a store on, I grew up in New York City in Manhattan, and it's a store on Broadway and 92nd Street. Can't remember the name of it. It was on the second floor above a shoe store. And that's where I went, like, you know, most days after school, browsed the new arrivals. You know, at a certain point, I even had a folder there, which is why I can say I'm like a card carrying, you know, comic book nerd. That's like, you know, they fill your folder up with all your titles and you just come in and pick them up. And, you know, it's not any different than just going to the store, but you just feel cooler because you got a folder behind the counter, you know. But anyway, so that's what that's where I started and was really into that. And then I think like college or after college, really, I had some roommates who were into more alternative comics like Peter Baggy's Hate and 8 Ball, you know, Daniel Close. And like that period was the first time that I realized comics could be about anything, you know, and not just like superhuman in tights and superheroes, you know, like, which I was into when I was younger, but that I was, you know, in my early 20s or whatever, I guess. It was like, oh, that was really eye-opening. And I really got into a sort of second wave of comic fandom, I guess, in that point, because I was like, oh, wow, you know, like this is just an art form. This isn't like, this doesn't have to be, you know, men in capes who are flying through the air. This can be like real people, and it's just a way to tell a story. And so I got really into that. And then the years since, and then, you know, the reason I'm here with our project is I'm a musician and songwriter, producer. And so, you know, I was here talking to you, Chad, a couple of years ago for the album that I did called The Ear Goggle Regales, The Ear Goggle Revels, which was a double album that came with a comic book that interpreted all the songs. And Patrick was the artist for some of that project, and that was sort of just a normal album with songs didn't really connect or whatever, and so the comic book was more of an anthology type of things. Different artists took each song, so it had a different character. And then so now we're following that up with Box of Tapes, which is full on like rock opera and a graphic novel. So it's all one story across 16 songs and then through the graphic novel. So it's like same concept as the one that we just did, but like more. Yeah, just kind of further down that road, more ambitious, bigger, just kind of trying to stretch the story out. This idea of combining music and comics together, see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
Patrick?
Oh, well, I'm a lifelong comic reader. I have older brothers, so I kind of learned how to read by sneaking into their boxes of comics and reading them. And then I kind of learned how to draw by taking those comics and drawing over them, which, my brothers didn't necessarily appreciate. But I think you could see comics were a little more disposable back then. Um, since then, I've just been devoted. I still have fond memories of like that one summer where I rediscovered X-Men for myself after having read a bunch of the older Silver Age X-Men, once again through my brothers, and then stumbling upon the Dark Phoenix saga as a youngster and, having my mind blown. And then from there, always having artistic inclinations, it was always an ambition to like create my own comics and did such things at the school newspaper. By the time I went to art school, I was a little more determined to like really try and make comics happen. And then out of art school, I promptly detoured into graphic design for a number of years, but that still kept me doing art, and still kept me leaning into sequential art because of the nature of the graphic design that I would do. But ultimately, comics was always something that was in the background. And then over the past handful of years, I've really just taken it and made it like the primary thing that I'm up to, which
Okay.
has been thanks to a lot to Kickstarter, but I've also had small pieces published in like anthology, like university anthologies focused on
Okay.
comics.
Cool. So, tell us a little bit about this project, because I know I kind of went back and watched the parts of the interview that we did for the couple years ago to kind of get a taste for it. But tell us, how um, if this one is that this one kind of involved, how did this one evolve out of this one? It sounds like, or
um,
that one.
yeah, kind of. They actually kind of started around the same time. In fact, this one might have I might have started working on this um, initially, even first, I think. Um, and I think it, for various reasons, which I can't remember all of which right now, we decided to kind of focus on the last one, which was more of a sort of anthology style. Um, First, maybe because it was a little bit easier, maybe because there was more people involved. Just kind of seemed like, okay, this is a more normal project. Like it's just a normal album with a comic book, and we're going to do each song with a comic interpretation and by a different artist, and that's going to be really cool and great. But that was kind of straightforward, and this one has been a much more kind of journey to, we had to think about a lot of things for this one that we didn't on the first one. Like, what are these characters? What do they look like? Like, what do they look like when they're younger? Because the story happens in two different time frames, sort of flashbacks and then present day. So like, what do they look like when they're younger? What do they look like now? What do they, like, how does the story move through this? There are certain things that need to happen, to move the story forward. How do we interpret those? Those were all questions that on the earlier album, Gale's Revel, as I call it, like that didn't really. That was more of a sort of partnership, I felt, between the music and the art. Whereas what I mean by that is like I would just send the song to these artists, and basically my hope was like, just do something with this. Like here's the lyrics, here's the music. What do you see? Like I wanted to see other people's kind of interpretations of that and take it somewhere totally different. And that worked to varying degrees. Like some of the artists, I know Patrick just did his own thing, which was amazing. The song I sent him just came back in this fantastical kind of like cyberpunk. I don't know what it was. It was so cool. It was called Killer, and it was about a like killer, like sex robot kind of vibe. It was great. And
the instructions were like Blade Runner-esque.
Yeah, I
That's
think
how you
that's
described it to me initially.
right. There was a vibe, but there was definitely not like I didn't write a script for any of those. I didn't say like panel 1, here's what happened. Panel 2, here's what happened. And this one was more involved in that way. I had to give a little bit of like instruction, like, okay, if this is a story from song to song and we're going towards an end or whatever, like certain things need to happen. The character needs to get from here to here in this song, and this, like, and I still think it was wide open for Patrick and Luis Santamarina as the other artist, who did the sort of present day storyline, and Patrick did the sort of past storyline. I think there was huge creative leeway, and I love what both of them came up with, but I think there was a little bit more of like just more of a thought process. It had to be more planned out. So I think maybe that was why we did that one first. But
I mean, that's exactly how I remember it, because when we first started talking, there were certain questions that came up, like the character design and the setting, and like if this is going to be a story, there's just some basic world building concepts that we started talking about initially, and then there was the process of putting together a comic. So I remember like talking with you, Ezra, and then that kind of led to the concept that, oh, by the way, I have this other album I'm working on. What if we tried out some of these ideas,
right,
matching a song with a comic? We tried it out on that album.
right.
Since you had, we were already in talks of my doing the album artwork
Right.
for
Right.
that project. It just became an extension to be like, well, we're talking about this big, ambitious rock opera, and then we're also talking about this basic, well, not really basic, but basic for me, album cover, right? That was
Right.
my extent. And then we started exploring the potential of, well, what if we try out a series of experiments adapting a song into a comic? And I mean, you had the genius idea of just really casting a wide net to find a whole range of artists to fill in that anthology. And then that gave us a really strong footing to start looking at how we wanted to tackle a more linear story,
Right.
So you've kind of given some vague parts of the story. Tell us, without obviously giving anything away, what is the story about? Who are the main characters? Conflict,
Yeah. So I don't mean to be mysterious about it. It's the story. Box of Tapes is about a kid, a teenager, who lives with his dad in a dark, broken down city. His mom has vanished some years before, and he gets in a fight with his dad. He runs up to the attic and finds a box of cassette tapes, and he starts playing them. And he discovers that they're songs by his mom and dad from years ago. And through these songs, he starts to piece together what happened to her, which was, it turns out, she was a militant Luddite, like radical anti-technology activist, hence the cassette tapes. And he goes through the whole kind of journey of discovery of finding out what led her down this path and what happened to her. He goes to meet another character, Ned, who's like this old revolutionary, and gets the kind of full story. And then it kind of comes full circle back at the end where all the characters reconvene and magically sing together through a cassette tape. that part is not really scientifically vetted for accuracy, but it's a comic, so we felt we could
Yeah.
do that. So that's the essential storyline there. And so the story, as I said, it happens in the past and the present. Basically, Patrick does the songs that are on the cassettes that the teen is listening to, and so that's kind of like um, more his imagination because he's listening to this music and kind of imagining what these songs are about. And then Luis does the parts of the story that are more in the present day and are a little more linear, of like the kid, finding these tapes, confronting his dad, listening to the tapes, and then going on this journey to find out, what more about what happened to his mom. Uh,
So, kind of what was the inspiration for this, the storyline?
there was a lot of things. So that's funny. I was thinking there was an album I did before before the Regales Revels, which was called "The Beautiful Creatures Really Are So Cruel," which I released on cassette because I'm that dumb that I released music on cassette for the 3 people out there who actually have a cassette player. Anyway, that was I think 2018 or something, 2018, 2019. And on that album, there was this 4-part suite that I did all on my 4-track cassette recorder. And that was the first time that I had ever written songs that were connected,
Hmm.
like that told a story across more than just one song. I've always written songs that have characters, and kind of I love story songs. It's partly why I've gotten really into country music the last several years, just because like I just love the storytelling aspect of it, but I never did that as more than just like a single song. And so this one it was sort of about a young couple that meets it was called the Barricade Suite. A young couple that meets like during these like protest actions, kind of revolutionary. It's like they're young and hot, and like their relationship is just really intense because they're doing this. And then it's just the 4 songs kind of follow their relationship through getting a little bit older, like getting married, like um and then it was clearly a sort of metaphor for my relationship with my wife, which was nothing negative. If you're listening, honey, it was just like uh, it's just kind of meditating on like the different stages that we go through. That you meet somebody, you're dating, it's really fun, it's sexy, it's blah blah blah, and then as it just naturally progresses, and maybe you have kids or you settle down or whatever, and your just life becomes something different. It was clearly me kind of processing that and just making it more dramatic, and putting these characters on the barricades, and you know um throwing Molotov cocktails and how exciting that is, together, and all that stuff. And then anyway, the 4th song of that 4-song suite was called "She's Everywhere I Know," and it was set like 16 years in the future from the 3rd song, and it hinted that something had happened to the mom, to the woman, but didn't really explain anything. And I had this vague story that she had disappeared or something, and they were dealing with her loss. And it's funny. I took this out recently and listened to it, and like honestly, it's not very good. The whole thing, the whole sequence. I was really just kind of figuring out how to do something like this. I wasn't a very good singer. I was kind of learning how to make me. I've always been in bands, but this was kind of my first like making an album really on my own and writing the whole song by myself and singing it and playing all the instruments and stuff. So I think I was still figuring out, but anyway, I did that and I loved it. I just really it was like, wow, this was really cool. This kind of feeling of following this story and fleshing it out more than I normally do. So I wanted to do it more. I wanted to explore it. Like, what if I did a whole album like this? And I started thinking about, that. And so I started casting around for like, what kind of story would inspire me to really dig into it and fill it out. And I started thinking about that gap between the 3rd and 4th song, and like a story that was kind of centered on these characters in the future, and something had happened and they were investigating their past. And then also I should say that around the same time I had all these people close to me die. My father-in-law passed away. I had a couple friends who just passed away. And so I was thinking about just kind of like grief and loss, and like the sensation of people who are part of our lives and just all of a sudden just gone forever, and what happens to us who are left behind, like how do we deal with that hole in our lives that was such a big part of it that's now just an absence that we feel. And so that all played into it, and so I started that's where this story kind of started to take shape. The more like militant activist stuff that we learn about with the mom kind of came from that earlier piece that I wrote, but also my own and then the anti-technology stuff is just stuff that I rant about all the time. And now that I'm a dad, I tell my kids, like, come on, get off the screen, like, be here with me, that kind of thing. And I'd say it to myself too, to catch myself, like, put the phone down, Ezra, so I added all that stuff, but it really was kind of just became this larger sort of metaphor for loss and grief and, and following these characters around. So
Patrick, from your point, once you got the songs from Ezra, what what was your process for coming up with your with the art?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a chance to really explore and expand like my style of comic illustration. Because like because we were kind of like finding a new way to create the comic, right? This wasn't just Ezra handing me a script and saying these things happen, draw it, right? It was first of all, the priority was to experience the music, right?
Hmm.
But then having, that option to hear the music and to hear it as it was evolving, right? Ezra wasn't providing me with like the 100% finished track. He would let me hear it as it was evolving. So that helped me kind of get some ideas or get some sensibilities about what the comic could feel like, for lack of
Hmm.
of a better term. And then we would talk about like what were the story elements, because that was like one of the things that we realized between the projects was that we really needed to kind of build the story from the ground up, at least in terms of adapting it into a comic, right? It's not like we were taking a movie or taking a book and just making a comic from it, right? These were songs, so there's like the story aspect of the song, but then there's all of the other elements that make a song music, right? So there were like there were two levels of adapting that, and so he would give me like constraints, because it was like this song would happen when the main character would press play on a tape. He would experience that song, and that would give him like one sliver of of this picture that he was assembling of his mom, right? So each song kind of had its own theme, clearly,
Hmm.
right? Its title and its sound. But then there was ways to try and bring in some of the try and convert some of the themes and make like visual equivalents for them. And so that would include like researching, art, like going through like the art history book and trying to like think of like one example I like to think of is one of the early sequences. The teen has what I like to describe as an ecstatic vision, right? He has this moment where he envisions his mom in a whole new way. And so I wanted to really carry a lot of like art history lessons and embed that scene of like the classic comic book splash page, except it's the mom is the hero. And so but it's not she's not like an action hero, or at least not yet. And so I wanted to infuse like some art history themes of like what kind of female heroes have been represented in art, before the modern day. And so that led me down some roads around stained glass and various like Catholic saints that have been elevated. And I kind of wanted to like let the artwork be informed by those images when I would create that scene, because it's a rock opera. We have so many options to do like psychedelic art, concert poster art. Those things struck me as a little too on the nose. So I wanted to go past it and try and find other influences that would help match,
Mhm.
the kind of the modern day tragedy that's kind of being played out here, right? Because this is a story, it's not quite post-apocalyptic, but in a way it's right there on that edge, not just in terms of like, the characters live in a city that has no power, but in the sense of like this kid is like he's breaking his world apart and a whole new world is kind of crashing into his life just as he's approaching adolescence, right? So it's like that perfect metaphor for growing up. And so like each song, right? Since each song kind of tracked like an element of how he was like how his image, his idealized image of his mom was being replaced with a much more controversial or much more like dynamic or controversial or dynamic, right? She was getting radicalized, and so he's witnessing this, and so each song kind of had that element. There'd be one song that had a little bit of a paranoid vibe, another song that really leaned into like what are the key news items that people might react to that's going to move them along this track from being like a content stay-at-home mom into a more of a eco warrior, I guess. So like I kind of had to hunt for those images in like my references and in my influences because it was still a very grounded story, right? There were no space aliens, there were no monsters, there were no you know, huge guns in this comic, but all of that stuff is more about like the emotional experience that this teenager is having.
So, Patrick, who would you say that your artistic influences are, and how would you describe your style?
Well, I think I think I have this habit of trying to reinvent my process with each project. So I think with this one, I really try to lean into the approach that an artist like J.H. Williams III took when he created his epic work with Alan Moore, right? Like
Hmm.
Prometheus,
Hmm.
which where his each issue kind of was like a whole, he would take on specific parameters in his art, and then that whole issue would really be structured around his decision to like make it, you know, each image be like a perpetual pan from left to right, or he would draw these comics that would take place on a Mobius strip, or he would just do these crazy things with each issue, and he would push the medium further and further. So I kind of wanted to use some of that where I would like, I could let myself be influenced by different works of art and use the digital environment because I like to do a lot of traditional analog artwork as well, pen and ink, brush and ink, but I wanted this to
Hmm.
be primarily a digital environment, and so that allowed me to play with patterns and like create like digital elements that I could repeat and return to kind of create some like visual equivalents to say Ezra, help me out here. What do you call like a little musical flourish that happens over the course of a song?
Oh, you mean like a motif or like a recurring theme or something like that?
Right, like more than a bass line, right? Like
Yeah,
we all
yeah.
know what a bass line is and how that fits to music.
Right.
Whatever that little flute solo that happens
Uh-huh.
every so often over the course of a song. So
Right, right. Yeah.
instead of a flute solo, I had like a little, geometrical triangular pattern that would represent, different states of mind or different states of emotion, and I could bring
Right.
those into the background. So
Yeah.
maybe a little Bill Sienkiewicz, although I didn't do any airbrushing, but just that sense of like, all of the stuff that's going on in the inside is on the page. That's really what I wanted to create with the comic, is that sense of altered heightened reality.
Yeah. I just have to say, I mean, for me, getting these pages back from Patrick and just seeing how deep he was going on this stuff, I just loved seeing this reflected in the art and seeing the music uh, interpreted in this way. Just really just amazing for me, that experience,
Now, I think Patrick said that he was, you weren't giving him the full song. So, as you two were working, were you looking at Patrick's art and then finishing the songs? And did that kind of inspire the direction of the song?
There was a couple that, were not done. I mean, I think I had the songs written, but in some of the cases, the recordings were more like the demo, kinda they weren't really finished, but I wanted him to hear what this was about and get a feeling for it and whatever, and then I would kinda work on finishing it. Definitely some of the pages I got and definitely inspired me. It was like, "Oh, wow, I gotta go back and make this really good," like, this can't just be, just this can't be an unfinished little demo here with this artwork, like, I gotta measure up, so there was definitely, some of that element for me.
And what style music did you tap into for this project?
I mean, it's kinda I think it's all over the place. I should send I sent a couple of clips to you, but, I don't know if you can play them. But anyway, I mean, it opens with like the kid just playing his acoustic guitar kind of ballad, but there's some distorted, noisy stuff that comes in, and then there's like some more kind of indie rock stuff, and there's like some 70s like hard rock jams, and then there's a little bit of like hip hop, trip hop that comes in, and then there's some really wild um, stuff toward the end of the act one that gets sort of atonal almost. There's some acoustic ballads and like some dance tracks. I kind of really wanted it to be a lot of I wanted it to reflect like the different worlds that the story is moving through, and so I really didn't want it to stay in just one style or have one kind of um, sound to it all. Like wanted it to be as dynamic as the artwork was going to be, in moving it through. And it's there's also guests. I sang the parts of the dad, but we had Forrest Van Dyke, who's an incredible singer. He's now on tour with the Lion King. He did. I knew him from playing wedding gigs in the city. And he sang the parts of the teen, and then Jessica Jelliff, who was in this amazing theater company named Banana Bag and Bodice. I did a show called Beowulf with them, and she's just incredible. So she sang the mom, and then Christian Gibbs, who was in Stu's show Passing Strange, which was an off-Broadway thing in the city. He sang the role of Ned, so a couple songs with the old revolutionary guy. So I really wanted there to be, these different voices and this real sense of like different characters and different moods and different atmospheres, reflected in the music as well as the art. So I was really trying to kind of vary it, mix it up like that.
Were there any challenges that you faced with writing, this rock opera type uh, production?
Yeah. I mean, I'd never done anything like this before. Like, like I said, the only thing that I did was that 4-song piece that I did on an earlier album. And it's like to, I mean, it went smoother than you might think, I guess. Although I did go through several incarnations, I think, before it got to a stage where I even contacted, Patrick or any other artist or any other person. I was working on this. I think I wrote a version of this and completely trashed it. I sent it to some of my theater friends and got no response at all, which can mean somebody's really busy, but it's like never really a sign that your stuff is really great. It's obviously like not, and then I listened to it more. I was like, okay, well, no, this isn't. I got to start over. Threw everything out, started working again. But I think the story kind of, once I started going on it, it really kind of took on a life of its own, and it wasn't as hard actually to kind of follow it through. There were a couple sort of plot holes that I felt like okay, wait, he's, you know, he like towards the end, he's made his journey and found Ned, the old revolutionary. He's found out Ned has sung him the song, "Oh, We Believed," and has sort of told him the whole story of what happened to his mom as she died blowing up this power plant. And it's this big, and Patrick's this incredible two-page spread that kind of like lays it all out while this verse is happening. And then I really didn't know, like, okay, I know that the end is him and the dad, you know, listening to this final tape and then singing along with the mom and it, you know, her spirit or whatever interacting. But I didn't know how, you know, how does he get from there? And, you know, and I'd never dealt with that writing songs before, like, oh, we need something to move the action from here to here. And so I thought of two other songs that were sort of more introspective, like him processing basically what was happening on his way back to his dad's house, kind of thing. So there were moments like that were just, they were challenging for me because that had never really come up before in songwriting for me. You know, everything had been self-contained in a song, and so this was like a really I liked it. It was a really cool challenge, and it kind of like I said, it kind of took on another life of its own. Like, well, the story is moving, and I have to just kind of follow it around. You know, like here's the teen, and he's here, and he's meeting with this guy, and now he's got to get back here. So we got to get him back there. You know.
Patrick, any challenges that you faced and had to overcome, or wanted to
Well,
strangle Ezra about?
marveling at what Ezra just described about, like, the need to write a song that gets, a character from point A to point B, and how, like, how very common that is for comics, right? How comics can very
Right.
frequently, pages get cut, pages get added. Oh, this little thing happens so much that we should maybe take that sequence and move it to the
Mhm.
next issue. You
And a
know,
lot of things happen also between the gutters.
exactly. So I mean, it was definitely like, you know, there would be times when I'd want to just like go off and like, can I just have 5 pages to luxuriate in this, one event or this one moment? So I mean, there were things like that where there was I mean, I did get 4 pages for a major sequence, which I think was really
Right.
a lot of fun because it
Yeah.
was it kind of starts it starts off pretty I mean, it stays pretty paranoid,
Yeah.
right? But like within the comic, it starts off very monochromatic, and then little by little color kind of gets introduced into it to kind of really zoom in into something like emotionality, like what is the classic cliche of green with envy, right? Like that kind of thing. But like, you
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
I won't admit to whether I was that obvious, but like those kind of choices, like that you could kind of build up over a couple of page sequences. So I mean, it was really fun to try and primarily work in double page spreads so
Mhm.
that you can kind of have a widescreen effect as well as zoom in and then read the comic. And then once again, because I was working digitally, I could play with how panels, how you could play with the panel layout, but then you could also drop stuff behind the panel as
Mhm.
well as in front of a panel. So it was fun to be able to push those boundaries. But then also, like, the key thing, which I want to remember to mention, was there would be points where I would start leaving panels vacant so that Luis can kind of come in and do like reaction shots, right? So if this whole sequence is about, the story of, a critical decision that the mom made while the teen was still a toddler, but then leaving some space so that Luis, the other artist who's doing most of the acting for the teen, can actually draw the teen's reaction to that revelation. And so that let me go a little bit wilder with my own style of artwork because I could lean on the reality that Luis was creating with his artwork.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I really loved having the two of them. You know, it was just such a part of the story. It became such a part of the story that their different styles kind of
Mhm.
dictated these two different worlds, which was totally appropriate for the story, and kind of intentional. But it just the way that it amplified, I think, that feeling of the story is happening in the present day, and it's this kind of monochromatic, like bleak, dark kind of life. Um, Thematically, that for me anyway, that was like a metaphor for sort of grief and like loneliness or missing somebody or whatever. And then this other wild world that was on the tapes, which was in the past, which is what Patrick was doing, which was much more colorful and fantastical. And I think it gave each of them, I think Luis would agree, like sort of a little more creative license to kind of explore, to even push both of those worlds even more,
Mhm.
because they were balanced out, they were in contrast to each other. So so it was really cool to see that develop.
I kind of think so because I remember noticing certain shifts in his and Luis's like panel layouts where like
Mm,
from the early thumbnail sketches that we just kind of would kind of track each other's progress with the
yeah.
thumbnail sketches. But then, he would just turn around and be like, "Oh, this is his take on a double page spread," and he'd kind of do some stuff.
Mhm.
And then he picked up some other motifs. Like we kind of went into this whole spiral staircase motif that just
Right.
kind of, you know,
Right.
for me, it was about like, it was like once again a visual metaphor for like the kind of paranoid spirals people might go through,
Hmm.
right, when they're all paranoid. But then it's just something that I saw he threw it back at me, so it became these little visual things that we would play back and forth as we were like as the pages were stacking up.
Right.
So, kind of, moving past the story itself, what with the Kickstarter campaign, what rewards are you offering, and what, if anything, did you learn from your previous campaign that you were able to apply to this one?
Yeah, all good questions. I mean, the rewards we have, the main event really is the record and the graphic novel, the physical, manifestations of all this. And then there's digital permutations of those also that are available, of course. And then there's some of the higher reward tiers are really fun. One of them is that I'll write a song for you if you like, if somebody wants a song written for somebody else or anything. That's something that I've done in the past, and I actually love it. It's really fun. And
That would make such a great holiday gift, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've done that for people, like, like write one for my wife or something like that. And I love it. Kind of like if you ever try and write a short story and you just have a blank page, or if you're trying to start some art or whatever, you have a blank page, it's paralyzing. But if somebody says, okay, this needs to be about, you know, the first thing that happened, what you had for breakfast or whatever. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay. Then you just start. It's kind of like that, like writing a song like that. It's kind of fun like that. So that's cool. And then we have the opportunity to have yourself drawn into one of the crowd scenes, like have your face in the crowd in the comic, which is cool. There's some of Patrick's original art, which we're offering at one of the tiers also, which is really amazing. Uh, and Yeah, I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. Um,
I mean, we start out with the most basic, 60-page graphic novel as a digital PDF, plus the 16 songs as a digital download, right? That's like the most basic, like you could be anywhere in the world and you could just get that. And then we just wanted to capture every format, right? So it's the hard copy graphic novel with the digital download, and then the hard copy graphic novel with CD for those people who want to throw it into their PlayStation. And then the centerpiece is the graphic novel with the double LP, right? So that's like the whole full package. And then it scales up from there, right? So then it could be the double LP, the graphic novel, and then the last project, right? The anthology with
right,
the ear goggles previous album, and
right.
then we keep adding more stuff, right? We've got stickers, we've got little extras like that. So if you want like some
Yeah.
cool stickers based on the scenes, or stuff you could throw on your guitar case or whatever. We've got those things in there too. But then we're just really trying to scale up, the fun stuff, right? If you want to be a protester in one of the pages, we can do that for you. And then, like Ezra said, like, this is going to be my 10th record album cover that I've done,
All right.
And so I did do, like I said earlier, I like to do stuff in an analog environment. So even though the comic is digital art, the album cover I did on like traditional vellum with pen and ink, and I, sat there and I drew that. And so, I would much rather that be on somebody's wall than to be in my flat file with other, illustrations and works of cover art that I've done. So, for the person who's a collector, this is a one of a kind work of art that's going to be made available for that, for that person who wants those bragging rights.
So, kind of going, with the idea that the kid finds a box of cassette tapes. If we were to, if you were to go into like your attic, what would be the 3 or 5 cassette tapes that would probably, be in, from when you collected cassette tapes would be would people find in your attic?
In my attic,
Yeah.
yeah, from that era, well, you'd probably find some Duran Duran, and you'd find some Yes tapes for sure. You'd find a bunch of mixtapes. I think that I was really into doing those for a while. Some of which were, well, when I was, I don't know how old, but when I must have been like 11 or 12, I guess, when I had my first cassette recorder, and I would tape songs off the radio by holding a mic up to the radio, like when they came on, and I would, press, like they're playing that song by In Excess, like, and then later on, I actually had a, tape dubbing and double deck thing, and I would make the actual, mixtapes and give them to my friends or whatever, So yeah, you would find a bunch of those, and this is not hypothetical. I mean, those are in they're in what was my dad's house. They're still in the attic. I actually have seen them recently. They're next to my comics, actually, which are in other boxes in that same attic. So yeah, I miss it. I mean, I still have cassettes. I have I have a box of some of these, which were so some of these, like, these are my tapes that I was recording, some of the songs from this project, maybe. Oh yeah, so this one is Roof by the Square. This is one of those one of the ones I was talking about, the Barricade Suite, that kind of predated. This is like the 4-part. I think this was song number 2. These are little 20-minute tapes that go in my 4-track cassette recorder. And so, yeah, so I still have this stuff around. And, I got my son a cassette boombox for last Christmas, along with like some AC/DC and Pink Floyd tapes. And he was pretty obsessed with it for a while. He was like carrying it all over the house and playing his tapes. So trying to pass it on, to the next generation also.
Patrick?
So yeah, so when my car had a cassette player, I might throw in like The Cure or Ministry into that tape player. But if I was to look, like, the one cassette tape that has survived, the move out west from New York to California, and the last remnants of tapes would probably be various mixtapes from the DJs who would spin at the various underground warehouse parties that I was a part of in one way, shape, or form. So those mixes, fortunately, some of those DJs I'm still in touch with, so they've sent me digital equivalents of those mixtapes because some of them are truly, unique items that are now just, they're just taking up space. I don't even have a thing to play them on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because I remember I used to have I used to have like, 2 or 3 of the cassette tape holders. You just kind of pull out and those are full. But I think for some reason, one yard sale we had, we some guy just came and bought them for like in bulk. So, and then CDs came, and now it's like I know I'm getting old because I've gone from when I was young, I listened to 8 tracks and records, and then cassette tapes and CDs, and now streaming, and well,
Yeah.
MP3s and
Right. Yeah,
streaming,
we've gone through all the formats.
and as the formats change, how you play them in your automobile has changed. Because
Yeah.
I remember my dad had an 8 track tape player in his truck, Suburban, and to play cassette tapes, we had that little adapter that you click the cassette in, and
Uh-huh.
so
I mean, I remember my older brothers being very cool in their convertible with the 8 track tape being plugged right into the dashboard next to
Oh
the
yeah.
stick shift.
I remember that too. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. And then I had my first car, I had a cassette player, and I was so into that, And
Well, what's
yeah,
funny is that the only format we did not offer for this Kickstarter was the 8 track tape. Like
yeah.
we did offer
True.
cassette tapes to
Yeah.
the first 50 backers, and
Yeah.
they right now we're at 85 backers, so we know those tapes have homes.
Yeah, those tapes
yeah.
are going out. Yeah. And we had, I mean, it's a rock opera called Box of Tapes, and it's about cassette tapes figuring prominently in the story. Come on, we have to put it on tape, Can't do this without offering a cassette. I don't know if anybody's going to actually play the cassettes when they get them, but
Well, yeah, because when I was at New York Comic Con this last month, I talked to this artist, and she did like a kind of a graphic novel version of her album, and
oh, cool.
she her press person hands me this cassette tape. I'm like going, how am I supposed to play this?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, it was just pretty cool to because I remember like one of my first cassette tapes was probably Bon Jovi's "Slippery When Wet," and
There we
I
go.
remember
Yeah.
I remember my parents or my dad having to listen to the album first before he gave it to me
To make sure.
because I kind of grew up in a very church uh, atmosphere, and
So you had
I,
to.
I I remember having to take the Fat Boys Wipeout tape back, and I wasn't allowed to listen to the Motley Crue tape, which I bought. So,
Well, shout at the devil. Yeah. I mean, come on. Yeah. Can't have that. Right. Yeah.
so um, anything else about the project, or anything else that maybe we haven't touched that you wanted to make sure that people knew about?
I don't, we covered a lot of ground here. I mean, I'm just, mainly excited to just, kind of combine these two art forms again, and just kind of like push it even further than we did in the last project. I think, one thing maybe we didn't mention is just one of the things that I find really exciting about this is that it's a more interactive, there are more interactive possibilities with this, I guess, than a typical like just album or just comic book, because I feel like you as the listener are a little more involved in how you're going to experience it. Like hopefully you can just read the comic, if you're not listening to it, and it'll still be good. It'll still make sense, and it'll still be like worthwhile. And the same is true for the album. I hope you can put the album on and just listen. You don't have to like listen to it and have the experience of reading along with it. So there's those two ways to experience it, but then there's also the way, where you actually are listening to the music as you're looking at the artwork and the graphic novel. And I think it's exciting to me to kind of like put that in the hands of the listeners and readers, instead of kind of just dictating, like, here it is, this is how you do this. This is,
Mhm.
this is how this is meant to be experienced, with which, we do all the time. There's nothing really wrong with that, but it's just interesting to me to kind of explore this. Like, it's almost like we're partnering with all the listeners and viewers, like, it's like, this is your project too. You get to kind of choose, like, how you're going to do this. So I like that aspect of it. And, I hope other people do too.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to channel the experience of going to a live Broadway show or whatever, like
Mhm.
that sense of, you're not just a passive member of the audience, you're there to be a part of the whole experience. And so we kind of built this project from the ground up with that in mind. And so while it's definitely an indie comic project and an indie music label project, I feel comfortable, like, saying that this is also like a work of young adult literature, right? There's such a strong like theatrical through line that I just can't stop thinking of, like, those music students. Maybe it's because I have a music class that plays every day outside my dining room window, so I can hear them trying to get the theme to Jaws just right on the trumpet, right? But so I'm always, I think maybe this
Sorry.
influenced a lot of my art for this project, was thinking of the young music students, right? That this project could speak directly to, because it's about a young character and because it's about music. So I'm really, really hopeful that, like, all the cool parents, all the cool aunts and uncles kind of think of those nephews and nieces who are, like, struggling through piano classes or piano lessons or whatever. And, here, this could make an awesome, end of graduation gift, or end of the
Mhm.
end of the year little perk for those students in particular. So that's something I'm hopeful.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I think this would be good, for that. And I hope it, gets out there to those people.
Mhm. And one last question is, like, do you have a favorite, like, rock opera or album that kind of tells, is in the similar vein, just that you like to listen to on a regular basis? I mean, for me, um, The
Yeah. What's
Wall
yours?
comes to.
The
I
Wall.
was gonna
Yeah.
say The Wall.
Right. That's a good one for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I have a Substack that I write, I started recently, and I took it on myself to listen to all these rock operas and concept albums and kind of, rate them and everything. And, so I ended up listening to a bunch. There's a whole bunch. I mean, there's a lot out there. There's of course, everybody knows the Who. My favorite, I think Tommy's great and Quadrophenia, but my favorite of the Who is a quick one while he's away, which is like their earlier, kind of a mini opera. It's only like 15 minutes long, and they did that before Tommy. And I just think it's fantastic. It's like moves through these different sections and tells this whole story in 15 minutes. There's also another one that's a little more obscure by the band called the Pretty Things, and it's called SF Sorrow. And that came out around like 68 or 69. And that is a really cool, rock opera that kind of moves through all these different storylines. And I mean, one storyline of just this, down on his luck English bloke, kind of familiar story, but the music is great and it's really well done. So that one is great. I mean, and yeah, I always love The Wall, of course. I used to listen to Queensryche, like, Operation Mindcrime was another good one. uh, you know, um, I'm trying to remember, like, when I first kind of heard, like, thought about, uh, songs that could do this. I guess maybe Rush, like 2112, is probably like one of my earliest experiences of being like, whoa, like that. whole album side of that album was the same thing, the same, the same song. Like that was cool. I think that might have been an early influence there. But
So,
I'll tell you something really funny that I only discovered Pink Floyd after many of the techno DJs who I was throwing warehouse parties with kept mocking me because I would listen to The Orb, which is like a kind of a psychedelic ambient electronic music band that would sample so many Pink Floyd riffs that people would get upset that I had no idea who or what Pink Floyd was.
That's funny.
And yet I was producing warehouse parties and stuff. So
Right.
these DJs made it a mission to like introduce me to the entirety of Pink Floyd's body of work in like one intense season, one intense summer.
Right,
So,
right.
and that included The Wall, the animated feature.
Of course, yeah. As it has to, yeah. What I forgot, I should mention, I did discover a more recent one by the Decemberists. I don't know if you know this album called The Hazards of Love. Came out a few years ago, and they're a band I didn't even really know, I wasn't that familiar with, but this album's really great. A really bleak, terrible story, tragedy, just done as a rock opera with different singers and everything. It's great. Yeah, I recommend that one. So that was a more contemporary one that I found.
So, if you want to give one final pitch for the project and where people can find, your work, feel free to pimp anything that you have.
Yeah, well, I mean the project's on Kickstarter. Probably the easiest way to find it is go to Kickstarter and just type in box of tapes.
Or Comic Watch, Crowdfunder Corner.
There you go. There you go. That's probably the best way. And the Kickstarter page also is a great way to kind of experience. We've got a bunch of videos of the music playing with the art, and a lot of the pages are up there for you to see, and a little bit more about the project and everybody involved in it. So that's a great place. My stuff is the Ear Goggles on Bandcamp. I just have, I don't know, 4 or 5 albums up there, of which this will be one of them soon. So yeah, you can go there. Patrick's got tons of great stuff.
Yeah, so our campaign will continue until I believe Tuesday, the 19th of November. So we're definitely eager to have as many people join the campaign at any level, because we really want this to be spread far. And, we're confident that we'll get it done, but we want as many people to have the chance to experience it as possible. So with that in mind, yeah, we're a project, Kickstarter says that we're a project they love, right? We've got that PWL sticker, which should make us a little bit easier to find. You can find me online as Plugo, and I have a website that's called Plugo Arts, where I do fairly regular blogging about comics and comic creation techniques. I do movie reviews also. I wasn't able to do the latest Venom movie because of conflict of schedules. That was the night that we were launching our campaign. So I had
okay. No.
But I did get to do a screening for the Joker, Folie à Deux. So I wrote a bunch about that one.
Cool.
But you can find out about that and a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that we've been talking about on my website at plugoarts.com. And you can also find the Box of Tapes campaign there. It's all interconnected. So find us, just Google, go to Kickstarter and look for boxoftapes.com first, and you'll find everything else in a nice little package.
And we'll continue to follow and promote you guys on our weekly crowdfunding corner on Comic Watch. And I'll put this video up there, and then best of luck as you finish up the campaign. And next time you have a project, and let's not make it 2 years, but we should chat again.
All right. Yeah. We'll get to work. As soon as we finish this one.
Yep.
Oh yeah, we've got big plans. We've got big plans. So, Chad, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah.
Chad.
Pleasure
This
to
has
hang out.
Well,
been
thanks
great.
for hanging out, and thanks for thanks to Ezra for letting me know. I think I found it, and I was like, I should probably contact him, and then he sends me a message going.
Did it for
So I
you.
was like,
That's good.
yes.
Well,
All
glad
right.
it happened. Glad it happened.
Well, yep. Uh, have a great evening, and
All right.
we'll be in touch.
All right. Great.
Excellent.
So
Have a
long.
great night, all.
Yeah.
Thank you.